The report sat on Admiral Corveth Saan's desk like an insult. He had read it 3 times now, and each reading made him more certain that whoever wrote it was either drunk or playing a joke. Kinetic weapons, he muttered, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. They still use kinetic weapons. His second-in-command, a tall female of his species named Vela, stood at attention nearby. The assessment is accurate, Admiral. Human military forces still rely primarily on projectile-based weaponry, chemically propelled metal slugs, explosive warheads. They have made no meaningful progress toward plasma technology or energy-based systems. Corveth leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. In his 40 years of service to the galactic hegemony, he had overseen the incorporation of 17 primitive worlds. Each one had been the same story. A young species would develop basic spaceflight, stumble into contact with the greater galactic community, and then face the simple choice that all young species faced: join the hegemony willingly or be incorporated by force. Most chose wisely. The ones that didn't learn quickly that their primitive weapons could not scratch the shields of hegemony warships. But this species, these humans, they were something special in their backwardness. 40 years, Corveth said. They have had access to galactic knowledge for 40 years. They could have purchased plasma weapon designs. They could have licensed shield technology. Every other species at their development level rushes to acquire modern weapons. But humans, he tapped the report with one clawed finger. They build bigger guns, faster bullets, more explosives. Vela's expression remained neutral, but Corveth could see the amusement in her eyes. The cultural analysts believe it is a form of stubbornness, Admiral. Humans appear to have an emotional attachment to their primitive weapons. They consider them part of their heritage. Heritage. Corveth stood and walked to the viewport of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The stars stretched out before him, cold and ancient. Somewhere ahead, invisible at this distance, was a small yellow sun and a small blue planet called Earth. They cling to heritage while the galaxy leaves them behind. Do they not understand what is coming for them? The incorporation notice has been transmitted, Admiral. They have 30 of their planetary days to respond. Corveth nodded slowly. This was the way of things. The hegemony did not conquer through cruelty. It conquered through inevitability. A young species was given time to understand their situation, time to see that resistance was not just futile, but foolish. The hegemony offered protection, trade, and access to technologies beyond their imagination. All it asked in return was submission, tribute, loyalty to the 12 great houses that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Those who accepted found themselves welcomed into a vast civilization. Those who refused found themselves welcomed anyway, after their military forces had been reduced to ash and their leaders had been taught the meaning of humility. Prepare the fleet for departure, Corveth ordered. We will deliver the terms in person. I want the humans to see exactly what they face if they choose poorly. Vela saluted and left to carry out his orders. Corveth remained at the viewport, watching the stars. He almost felt sorry for them. 8,000 light-years away, General Sarah Chen stood in a room that did not officially exist. The chamber was buried beneath a mountain in the Swiss Alps, accessible only through a maze of tunnels and security checkpoints that would have impressed the most paranoid dictator in human history. The walls were lined with screens showing data feeds from every corner of the solar system. In the center of the room, a holographic display showed Earth surrounded by a web of orbital installations. Most of those installations were registered as mining platforms, asteroid processing facilities, communications relays. Perfectly ordinary infrastructure for a species that had recently begun exploiting the resources of their home system. None of them were what they appeared to be. The hegemony fleet has departed from Sector 7, reported Colonel James Wright, Chen's chief of operations. Based on their standard transit speed, they will arrive at the edge of our system in approximately 6 days. Chen studied the holographic display. She was 63 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. 40 years ago, when the first alien vessel had appeared in Earth orbit and announced that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, Chen had been a young lieutenant. She remembered the excitement, the wonder. The hope that contact with an advanced civilization would solve all of humanity's problems. That hope had died quickly. The galactic hegemony was not interested in partnership. It was not interested in cultural exchange or mutual advancement. It was interested in control. The 12 great houses that ruled the hegemony had maintained their power for 12,000 years through a simple formula. They controlled the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Their warships carried shields that could absorb any energy weapon. Their plasma cannons could reduce cities to glass from orbit. No species could challenge them because no species could hurt them. The hegemony had assumed that humanity would be no different. They had offered the standard terms: submit and be protected, refuse and be destroyed. What they had not expected was that humanity would do neither. Project Longbow is at full operational status, Colonel Wright continued. All 17 platforms are online and tracking. Ammunition reserves are at maximum capacity. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Project Longbow, 40 years of work, 40 years of playing dumb, of pretending to be the backward primitives the hegemony believed them to be. 40 years of letting alien observers laugh at human stubbornness while secretly building something the galaxy had never seen. The hegemony relied on energy shields. Those shields were designed to disperse plasma bolts and laser beams, spreading the energy across the shield surface until it could be safely radiated away. It was elegant technology, sophisticated technology. Technology that had made the great houses invincible for millennia. But energy shields had a weakness so obvious that no one had thought to exploit it, because no civilized species would ever be primitive enough to try. Energy shields stopped energy. They did not stop matter. A plasma bolt was a superheated ball of gas, held together by magnetic fields. When it struck a shield, the shield could absorb the energy, channel it, dissipate it. But a solid object? A chunk of tungsten moving at 3% of the speed of light? The shield could not absorb its kinetic energy. It could not redirect its momentum. The tungsten would pass through the shield like it was not there, and then it would pass through the hull of the ship behind the shield, and then it would pass through the other side of the ship, and then the ship would be dead. It was so simple, so obvious. And yet for 12,000 years, no species had ever tried it, because kinetic weapons were primitive. Kinetic weapons were for savages who had not yet discovered the elegant beauty of plasma technology. No civilized species would lower themselves to throwing rocks. But humans were not civilized. Humans had never stopped throwing rocks. They had just learned to throw them faster. "What is the status of the decoy response?" Chen asked. "Ready to transmit on your order, General. The diplomatic team has prepared a message that should convince the hegemony we are properly terrified and preparing to negotiate." "Good. We need them overconfident. We need them to think this will be easy." Chen turned away from the holographic display and faced her staff. "Remember what is at stake here. If we fail, humanity becomes a slave species. Our children and our children's children will live under the boot of alien masters. But if we succeed—" She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "If we succeed, we change everything. Not just for us, for every species the hegemony has ever crushed. We prove that the great houses can be hurt. We prove that their power is not absolute." The room was silent. Every person present understood what they were about to attempt. They were going to pick a fight with an empire that had never lost a war. They were going to gamble the future of their entire species on weapons that the rest of the galaxy considered obsolete. And they were going to win. 6 days later, Admiral Corveth's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human solar system. 20 warships, each one capable of devastating a continent. It was overkill for a species this primitive, but the hegemony believed in making strong first impressions. Corveth stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching as the tactical display populated with data about the system ahead. A yellow star, 8 planets, various moons and asteroid installations. And there, third from the sun, a small blue world teeming with 7 billion primitives who had no idea what was about to happen to them. "Raise shields," Corveth commanded. "All ships, parade formation. I want them to see us coming." The fleet arranged itself into a perfect wedge, shields glowing with visible energy. It was a display of power designed to intimidate. designed to make the primitives understand that resistance was impossible. "Open a channel to Earth," Corveth said. "Let us give them one final chance to be reasonable." The communication officer worked her console. "Channel open, Admiral." Corveth straightened his uniform and adopted his most commanding expression. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Corveth San of the Galactic Hegemony's Third Incorporation Fleet. You have received our terms. You have had 30 days to consider them. The time for consideration is over. You will now accept incorporation into the hegemony, or you will face the consequences of refusal. There will be no negotiation. There will be no further warnings. You have 1 hour to transmit your surrender. If you do not, we will begin correction procedures. This is your final opportunity to preserve your civilization. Choose wisely." He signaled for the channel to be closed and settled into his command chair. 1 hour, then if necessary, a demonstration strike, a single plasma bolt to an unpopulated area. That was usually enough to convince even the most stubborn species that further resistance was pointless. The hour passed slowly. Corveth used the time to review the tactical data on human defenses, orbital platforms, ground-based missile installations, a small fleet of primitive spacecraft armed with chemical rockets and projectile weapons. Nothing that could threaten his ships, nothing that could even scratch their shields. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "we are receiving a response from Earth." On screen, a face appeared on the main display, a human female, older, with short gray hair and hard eyes. She wore a military uniform of some kind. "Admiral Corveth," the human said, "my name is General Sarah Chen, Commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. I have been authorized to deliver our response to your terms." Corveth leaned forward slightly. Something about this human bothered him. She did not look afraid. She did not look desperate. She looked like someone who was exactly where she wanted to be. "We decline," General Chen said. The channel closed. The screen went dark. Corveth blinked. He waited for more. For negotiation. For begging. For the usual desperate attempts to buy time. There was nothing. "Admiral," Vela asked, "your orders." Corveth shook off his unease. It did not matter how confident the human appeared. Confidence could not stop plasma. "Weapons officer, prepare a demonstration strike. Target the largest unpopulated landmass on the planet." "Targeting now, Admiral. Firing solution locked." Corveth nodded. "Fire." The plasma cannon hummed with power. A bolt of superheated matter launched toward the distant blue world. And then, 17 mining platforms across the solar system revealed their true nature. The first human railgun fired. The tungsten rod was 2 meters long and 10 centimeters wide. It weighed approximately 50 kilograms. It had no warhead, no explosives, no sophisticated targeting systems. It was, in the simplest possible terms, a metal stick. It was also moving at 3% of the speed of light. Admiral Corveth never saw it coming. No one on the Eternal Dominion saw it coming. The rod crossed the distance between Earth orbit and the fleet in less than 4 seconds. The ship's sensors detected it as a momentary blip, classified it as debris, and dismissed it as irrelevant. Then the rod hit the shield. The shield was designed to stop energy weapons. Plasma bolts, laser beams, particle cannons. These were the weapons of civilized warfare, and the shield was perfectly engineered to counter them. When energy struck the shield absorbed it, channeled it through a network of distribution nodes, and radiated it harmlessly into space. It was elegant, sophisticated, the product of 12,000 years of refinement. The tungsten rod was not energy. The tungsten rod was matter, and matter did not care about elegant engineering. The rod punched through the shield like it was not there. The shield flickered, confused by an attack it was never designed to handle. By the time the shield systems registered the penetration, the rod had already entered the ship. It struck the Eternal Dominion at the midpoint of the port side. The kinetic energy it carried was beyond anything the ship's hull could withstand. The tungsten did not explode. It did not need to. It simply transferred its momentum to everything it touched, and everything it touched came apart. The rod carved through the ship in less than 1/10 of a second. It passed through living quarters, killing the crew members inside instantly. It passed through the main reactor, cracking the containment vessel. It passed through the command deck, missing Admiral Corveth by less than 3 meters, and then it exited through the starboard side, leaving behind a tunnel of destruction that vented atmosphere and bodies and debris into the cold vacuum of space. Corveth was thrown from his command chair by the impact. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flashed red. The bridge was chaos, officers shouting reports that made no sense, damage control systems overloading as they tried to process the impossible. "What happened?" Corveth roared, pulling himself upright. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. "What hit us?" Before anyone could answer, a second rod struck. This one hit the engine section. The Eternal Dominion shuddered like a wounded animal. More alarms joined the chorus. The main display, somehow still functional, showed the ship's status in harsh red graphics. Hull breaches on 12 decks. Reactor containment failing. Engine systems offline. "Admiral!" Vela shouted from across the bridge, her voice barely audible over the noise. "We have to evacuate. The ship is lost." Corveth stared at the display, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were seeing. Lost? The Eternal Dominion was a hegemony battlecruiser. It had fought in 17 engagements and never suffered more than cosmetic damage. Its shields were supposed to be impenetrable. Its hull was supposed to be unbreakable. It could not simply be lost. But the display did not lie. The ship was dying around him. "All hands, abandon ship," Corveth ordered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "All hands, abandon ship." As he moved toward the escape pods, the main display updated with tactical data from the rest of the fleet. What he saw stopped him cold. Across the formation, ships were dying. The Righteous Fury, a heavy destroyer, had been hit by 3 rods in rapid succession. It was now 2 separate pieces of wreckage, spinning slowly apart. The Voice of Authority, a command cruiser, was venting atmosphere from a dozen wounds. The Hammer of Justice had simply vanished, struck by a rod that must have hit its ammunition stores and triggered a secondary explosion. 17 mining platforms, scattered across the human solar system, were firing in coordinated volleys. Each platform carried 8 railguns. Each railgun could fire once every 12 seconds. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 136 rods every 12 seconds. More death than the hegemony fleet could possibly absorb. "This is impossible," Corveth whispered, but impossibility did not stop the rods from coming. On Earth, in the buried command center beneath the Alps, General Chen watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. Each hegemony ship was represented by a red icon. Each kill was marked by the icon blinking out of existence. The room was silent except for the soft sounds of status updates and targeting confirmations. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had planned this moment for 40 years, but the reality of it was heavier than any simulation. "Eternal Dominion is evacuating," Colonel Wright reported. "Their flagship is out of the fight." Chen nodded. She had specifically ordered the targeting systems to cripple rather than destroy the enemy flagship. She wanted survivors. She wanted witnesses who could tell the rest of the galaxy what had happened here. "Continue firing," she said. "Prioritize any ship attempting to close range. We cannot let them reach bombardment position." The railgun platforms obeyed. They were fully automated, their targeting systems linked to a network of sensors that tracked every ship in the solar system. Human operators could override them if necessary, but for now the machines did their terrible work without supervision. Another hegemony destroyer died. Then another. A cruiser tried to accelerate toward Earth and was hit by 5 rods in 2 seconds. It came apart like a toy in the hands of an angry child. "They are breaking formation," Wright observed. "The survivors are retreating toward the system edge." Chen watched the red icons scatter. 9 ships remained from the original 20. They were running at full speed, desperate to escape the killing field. Their shields, useless against the tungsten rods, still blazed with power. Their plasma cannons, unable to hit targets light minutes away, remained silent. For 12,000 years, the hegemony had dominated the galaxy through technological superiority. Their shields could stop any weapon. Their ships could destroy any threat. They had become so confident in their invincibility that they had stopped innovating, stopped questioning, stopped imagining that someone might find a way to hurt them. Humanity had found that way. Cease fire, Chen ordered. Let them go. Wright turned to her with surprise. General, we could destroy the entire fleet. I know, but that is not our goal. Chen moved closer to the display, watching the fleeing ships with something like pity. We want them to survive. We want them to go home. We want them to tell everyone exactly what happened here. She turned to face her staff. Today we proved that the hegemony can be hurt, that their shields are not invincible, that their power is not absolute. That message is more valuable than 11 more dead ships. By tomorrow, every species in the galaxy will know that humans built weapons that ignore hegemony shields. By next week, they will be studying our technology. By next month, they will be building their own railguns. A slow smile crossed her face. We did not just win a battle today. We started a revolution. Admiral Corveth floated in his escape pod, watching the wreckage of his flagship tumble past the viewport. 11 ships. 11 ships destroyed in less than 2 minutes. He had watched them die from the relative safety of the escape pod, unable to do anything except stare in horror as the primitives slaughtered his fleet with nothing more than pieces of metal. How? The question burned in his mind. How had they done it? Kinetic weapons were obsolete. Every species abandoned them after developing energy shields. The tactical calculations were simple. Energy weapons could overcome shields with enough concentrated fire. Kinetic weapons could not. Therefore, energy weapons were superior. Therefore, shields focused entirely on stopping energy weapons. No one had considered that kinetic weapons might simply go faster, that instead of trying to overcome shields, someone might just punch through them. It was so simple, so obvious, so humiliating. The communication system in Corveth's pod crackled to life. Admiral Corveth, said a human voice. This is General Chen. Please respond. He stared at the speaker for a long moment. Part of him wanted to remain silent, to maintain some dignity in defeat, but his duty demanded otherwise. I am here, human. Good. I wanted to make sure you survived. You and your crews are free to leave our system. We will not fire on retreating vessels. How generous. The words came out bitter. You destroy 11 warships and thousands of lives, and then you offer mercy. We offered peace first, Admiral. We offered to decline your incorporation notice quietly. We would have been happy to be left alone. You insisted on bringing warships. Corveth had no response to that. She was right. The hegemony had come to threaten and intimidate. They had never imagined that the primitives might fight back. Go home, Admiral, Chen continued. Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them that humanity is not interested in conquest or revenge. We simply want to be left alone. But if anyone comes for us again, we will be ready. The communication channel closed. Corveth looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the survivors of his fleet were gathering, preparing for the long journey home. They would bring news of this disaster to the Council of 12. They would explain that humanity had weapons that could not be stopped by shields, that the entire military paradigm that had sustained the hegemony for 12,000 years was now obsolete, and they would have to explain what that meant for the future. Because if humans could build these weapons, other species could too. The subject races of the hegemony, kept in line by the threat of hegemony naval power, would learn that the great warships could be killed, that the shields were worthless, that the invincible masters were not so invincible after all. Corveth closed his eyes. He had come to this system expecting to oversee the simple incorporation of another primitive world. Instead, he had witnessed the beginning of the end. The hegemony would never be the same. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. It began with emergency transmissions from the surviving hegemony ships, reporting their impossible defeat. But those official channels were quickly overwhelmed by something far more powerful. Video recordings, sensor logs, personal accounts from crew members who had escaped the slaughter. The footage was shared from ship to ship, station to station, world to world. It showed the mighty Eternal Dominion being cored through by an invisible projectile. It showed destroyers and cruisers dying in moments. It showed the most advanced warships in the galaxy, fleeing from a species that still used bullets. Within hours, every major news network in the hegemony was covering the story. Within days, the entire galaxy knew. And everywhere, from the gleaming towers of Throne Prime to the mining colonies of the outer reaches, the same question was being asked. If the humans could do it, why can't we? The answer was simple. They could. Railgun technology was not complicated. It did not require exotic materials or secret knowledge. It required magnets and metal, nothing more. Any species with basic industrial capacity could build them. For 12,000 years, the hegemony had maintained power because no one could challenge their shields. Now suddenly, everyone could. On 100 subject worlds, engineers began studying the human weapon designs that were already spreading across the network. On 100 more, resistance movements that had been crushed decades ago began to whisper of revolution. The first human railgun had fired, and across the galaxy, crowns began to tremble. The Palace of Eternal Authority had stood at the heart of Throne Prime for 9,000 years. Its towers reached toward the sky like the fingers of gods. Its halls could hold millions. Its walls were carved from stone quarried on 100 worlds, each block a reminder of the hegemony's reach. High Lord Malachar walked these halls now, and for the first time in his long life, he felt them trembling. He was old. Old even by the standards of his species, which counted time in centuries rather than decades. He had served on the Council of 12 for 300 years. He had seen rebellions rise and fall. He had watched younger species reach for independence and fail. He had always known with the certainty of faith that the hegemony would endure. Now he was not so sure. The council chamber was circular, with 12 thrones arranged around a central holographic display. Each throne represented one of the great houses that had ruled the galaxy since before recorded history. Each house commanded a fleet of warships, an army of soldiers, an empire of subject worlds. Together they controlled everything that mattered, or they had until yesterday. "This is a disaster," said Lord Viken of House Chorus. He was young for a council member, only 150 years old, and he had the impatience of youth. 11 ships destroyed, thousands of our people dead. And for what? A species we could have ignored. Ignored? Lady Solus of House Eternal rose from her throne, her silver robes catching the light. They destroyed a hegemony fleet. They cannot be ignored now. The entire galaxy is watching. If we show weakness, every subject world will think they can do the same. They can do the same, Malachar said quietly. The chamber fell silent. 11 pairs of eyes turned to the oldest member of the council. "That is the problem we face," Malachar continued. "It is not that humans defeated our fleet. It is how they defeated it. Their weapons were primitive by design, simple by construction. Any species with basic industrial capability can replicate them. The Keth could build railguns within months. The Vorian already have the infrastructure. Even the Merlan, whom we crushed 3 centuries ago, could produce them if they chose." "Then we must act quickly," Lord Veckan insisted. "Destroy Earth before the technology spreads further. Make an example so terrible that no one dares replicate it." "The technology has already spread," said Lord Anthos of House Prime. He was a strategist, cold and analytical, the closest thing the council had to a neutral voice. "Our intelligence services confirm that railgun designs are being downloaded on over 200 worlds. We cannot suppress information that is already public." "Then we suppress the builders," Lord Viken said. "Anyone who attempts to construct these weapons will be destroyed. Their worlds will be glassed. Their species will be erased." Malachar shook his head slowly. "And how do we glass their worlds, Lord Vikan? With our fleets? The same fleets that just proved they can be killed by metal sticks?" He stood and walked toward the central display. "You are thinking like a ruler whose power is secure. But our power was never secure. It rested on a single assumption, that our shields could not be penetrated, that our warships could not be harmed. That assumption is now false, and every species in the galaxy knows it." He waved his hand, and the display showed a map of hegemony space, hundreds of worlds connected by trade routes and supply lines and military patrols. It had always looked like a tapestry of power. Now it looked like a web of vulnerabilities. "We rule because we are feared," Malachar said. "We are feared because we are invincible. But we are no longer invincible. How long before the Keth realize this? How long before the Vorian? How long before every species we have ever conquered decides that perhaps this time they might win?" The council was silent. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "We must crush the humans," Lady Solus said finally. "Whatever the cost. We must prove that rebellion still carries a price. And if we fail, Malachar asked, if we send our fleets to Earth and they are destroyed as thoroughly as the first one, what then? We will not fail. We will send everything, the combined fleet, every warship of every house, 3,000 ships against a single world. Even with their railguns, they cannot stop us all. Malachar considered this. 3,000 ships. It was the largest force the hegemony had ever assembled. The last time it had been gathered was 500 years ago to crush a rebellion that had spanned an entire sector. They had won that war, but the cost had been enormous, and that rebellion had not possessed weapons that could kill their ships. But what choice did they have? If they did nothing, they appeared weak. If they appeared weak, the rebellions would begin. And once they began, they would spread. The hegemony would tear itself apart from within. Better to take the risk. Better to gamble everything on one decisive victory than to watch their empire crumble piece by piece. Very well, Malachar said. I will lead the combined fleet personally. The council stirred. Lord Anthos leaned forward. High Lord, surely there is no need for you to... There is every need. Malachar's voice was hard. If we are to ask the great houses to commit their entire military strength, they must see that the council is willing to share the risk. I am the oldest. I am the most expendable. I will go. He turned back to the display, zooming in on the tiny yellow sun that humans called Sol. Send the orders. Every house, every ship, every soldier. We assemble in 3 months, and then we end this. On Earth, General Chen received the intelligence report with grim satisfaction. The combined fleet, she said, reading the summary, every warship they have, they're not taking any chances. Colonel Wright stood beside her in the command center. The displays showed the solar system, now bristling with new defenses. In the 3 months since the first battle, humanity had not been idle. The original 17 railgun platforms had become 47. The moon had been transformed into a fortress, its surface dotted with launch facilities and targeting stations. Mars hosted backup command centers. Asteroid bases hid among the belt, invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. 3,000 ships, Wright said. Even with our expanded network, that's a lot of targets. It is. We won't be able to stop them all at the edge of the system like last time. They'll get closer. Some will reach orbit. Chen pulled up tactical projections on the display. Our simulations suggest we can destroy approximately 2,000 ships before they reach bombardment range. That leaves 1,000 ships capable of attacking Earth directly. That's still enough to devastate the planet. It would be if we let them get into bombardment formation. Chen smiled grimly. But we have a surprise waiting for them. She entered a command, and the display updated to show a new element. Millions of tiny dots spread throughout near-Earth space in carefully calculated patterns. Each dot was a tungsten pellet, about the size of a human fist. Each pellet was attached to a small thruster that could adjust its position on command. We call it the gravel screen, Chen explained. 200 million tungsten pellets seeded throughout orbital space. When the enemy ships enter the engagement zone, we fire the railgun platforms not at the ships, but at specific coordinates. The railgun rounds pass through the pellet clouds, accelerating them to lethal velocities through kinetic transfer. Wright's eyes widened as he understood. You're not firing individual rounds at individual ships. You're creating a wall of metal. Exactly. Any ship that enters the zone faces not 1 or 2 projectiles, but thousands. Shields that might have a chance against a single railgun round will be overwhelmed by a swarm. And because we're accelerating the pellets with railgun rounds rather than firing them directly, we can reload and fire again within seconds. That's... Wright paused, searching for the right word. That's terrifying. It is. And I wish we didn't have to use it. Chen's expression grew somber. 3,000 ships means hundreds of thousands of crew members. Fathers and mothers and children, just like us. They're not evil. They're just following orders, serving an empire that has never given them reason to question its power. She looked at the display, at the tiny dots that represented death for so many. I don't want to kill them, she said quietly. I just want them to leave us alone. They won't leave us alone, General. You know that. I know, that's why we built the gravel screen. She straightened her shoulders. But I want to give them one more chance. Before the battle begins, I'm going to transmit an offer. Surrender, and they can go home. Their crews will be treated as prisoners and released as soon as peace is negotiated. No executions, no humiliation, just an end to the fighting. Wright looks skeptical. You think they'll accept? No, but I want them to have the choice. I want the galaxy to see that we offered them a way out, and they refuse. When historians write about this war, I want them to know that humanity did not seek destruction. We sought survival. The blood that's about to be spilled is on their hands, not ours. Wright nodded slowly. I understand, General, and for what it's worth, I think you're right, but we should still prepare for them to refuse. Oh, we will, Chen turned back to the tactical display. We have 3 months to prepare. Let's make sure they count. Across the solar system, humanity worked. On Luna, construction crews built railgun emplacements at a rate that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The low gravity made the work easier, and the lack of atmosphere meant the platforms could fire without interference. Each platform was manned by a crew of 12, living in pressurized bunkers beneath the surface. On Mars, the backup command center took shape in the red dust. If Earth fell, if the primary command center was destroyed, the war would continue from here. Automated factories churned out ammunition and spare parts, feeding the insatiable appetite of the railgun network. In the asteroid belt, mining ships that had once extracted ore now harvested raw materials for military production. Tungsten, iron, nickel. The building blocks of war, every chunk of metal was precious. Every hour of production mattered, and on Earth itself, the population waited. They knew what was coming. The news networks had reported everything. 3,000 warships, the largest fleet in galactic history, were heading toward their home. The hegemony intended to make an example of them. To destroy human civilization so thoroughly that no species would ever dare to resist again. But the people of Earth did not panic. They did not flee. They went to work, building and preparing and waiting. They had seen the first battle. They had watched 11 hegemony warships die in minutes. They knew that their species had found a way to fight back, and they were ready to fight. In schools, children learned about the railgun technology that protected them. In factories, workers put in extra shifts to produce more ammunition. In homes, families prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The first human railgun had fired, and it had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The old order was crumbling, and humanity, the species that the hegemony had dismissed as primitive and backward, stood at the center of the storm. 3 months. That was how long they had until the combined fleet arrived. 3 months to prepare for the battle that would determine the future of their species and the future of the galaxy. The combined fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a storm appearing on a clear day. 3,000 warships arranged in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. Battle cruisers and destroyers and carriers and support vessels, representing every scrap of military power the 12 great houses could muster. High Lord Malachar stood on the bridge of the Grand Sovereign, the largest warship ever constructed by the hegemony. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons, protected by shields that could theoretically withstand a direct nuclear strike. It was the symbol of everything the hegemony represented: power, authority, invincibility, or what had once been invincibility. All ships have arrived, reported Fleet Commander Saurus, a younger officer who had been assigned to coordinate the massive force. No losses during transit. The fleet is combat ready. Malachar nodded slowly. He had studied the intelligence reports during the 3-month journey. The humans had not been idle. Their railgun network had expanded dramatically. Their lunar installations had tripled. They had scattered defensive platforms throughout the inner system. But it would not be enough. Could not be enough. 3,000 ships against one world. Even if every platform fired constantly, they could not stop the entire fleet before it reached Earth. Some would die. Many would die. But enough would survive to complete the mission. Open a channel to Earth, Malachar ordered. I will offer them one final chance to surrender. The communication officer worked her console. Channel open, High Lord? Malachar straightened his robes and faced the recording sensors. People of Earth, I am High Lord Malachar of the Galactic Hegemony. I come to you not as a conqueror, but as a realist. You have scored a remarkable victory against our initial force. Your weapons are clever and your courage is undeniable. But you must understand what you now face. He gestured and tactical data appeared beside his image. 3,000 warships, 40 million soldiers, weapons capable of reducing your world to a lifeless rock. You cannot stop us all. You know this. I know this. There is no shame in recognizing an impossible situation. His voice softened slightly. Surrender now, and your people will live. Your civilization will be preserved, though it will exist under our authority. Your leaders will be replaced with governors who understand their place in the galactic order, but your children will survive. Your culture will endure. Is that not worth more than defiant death? He paused, letting his words settle. You have 1 hour to respond. If I do not receive your surrender, the fleet will advance. And when we are finished, there will be nothing left of your world but a warning to others. He signaled for the channel to close. Transmission complete, High Lord. Malakar returned to his command chair and waited. General Chen watched the recording in the buried command center. Around her, staff officers prepared for the battle that was now inevitable. The air was thick with tension and the hum of active systems. He almost sounds reasonable, Colonel Wright observed, if you ignore the part about subjugating our species. He is reasonable in his way, Chen replied. He genuinely believes he is offering us the best possible outcome. Submit peacefully and live as servants, or resist and die. From his perspective, those are the only two options. And from our perspective, Chen stood and walked to the holographic display. The combined fleet was visible as a mass of red icons at the edge of the system. 3,000 ships. The reports had not exaggerated. It was an armada that could darken the skies of any world. But humanity had not been idle. From our perspective, there is a third option, she said. We win. She turned to face her staff. All platforms, prepare for engagement. Luna installations, confirm targeting solutions, gravel screen projectors, activate tracking systems, all defensive assets, full combat readiness. Across the solar system, humanity's defenses came alive. Open a channel to the combined fleet, Chen ordered. Let's give our answer. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, General. Chen faced the sensors. Hi, Lord Malakar. I am General Sarah Chen, Commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. I have received your generous offer and discussed it with my government. We have reached a decision. She paused, letting the moment stretch. We respectfully decline. You ask us to choose between slavery and death. We reject both options. We will remain free, and we will live. If you doubt this, you are welcome to test us. But I must warn you, a great many of your people will die today. Their blood will be on your hands, not ours. We asked only to be left alone. You insisted on coming here. Whatever happens next is your responsibility. She took a breath. That said, I want to make one thing clear. Any ship that breaks off its attack will not be fired upon. Any crew that surrenders will be treated humanely and returned to their families when peace is negotiated. We take no pleasure in killing. We simply refuse to be conquered. The choice of what happens today is yours. She signaled for the channel to close. Wright looked at her. They won't accept. No, but their crews will remember that we offered. Some of them might hesitate. Some might question. And when this is over, they'll know that we gave them every chance to walk away. Chen turned back to the display. Now, let's get to work. The combined fleet began its advance at exactly the moment the deadline expired. 3,000 ships moved as one, shields blazing, weapons charged. They came in waves, the faster destroyers leading, the heavier battlecruisers following behind. It was a formation designed to absorb casualties while closing distance. The hegemony commanders knew they would lose ships. They were prepared to lose hundreds, even thousands, if it meant reaching their objective. The railgun platforms opened fire when the fleet crossed the first engagement threshold. Tungsten rods streaked through the void at 3% of light speed. They struck shields and passed through. They struck hulls and passed through. Ships died in pairs and groups, their crews never seeing what killed them. But the fleet kept coming. Malakar watched the tactical display with grim determination. The casualty reports scrolled past faster than he could read them. The righteous flame, destroyed. The herald of truth, destroyed. The Sword of House Chorus destroyed. Names and ships and lives vanishing in the cold equations of war. Maintain formation, he ordered. Continue advance. We expected losses. The fleet pressed on. The railgun fire was intense, but it was not infinite. The platforms could only fire so fast. The ammunition was not unlimited, and 3,000 ships presented more targets than even the expanded human network could engage simultaneously. By the time the fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, they had lost 400 ships. By the time they reached the asteroid belt, 600, but over 2,000 remained, still advancing, still determined. We're through the first defensive line, Fleet Commander Saurus reported. The lunar installations are next. All ships prepare for close-range engagement, Malachar ordered. Launch fighters, deploy assault craft. Once we break their orbital defenses, nothing will stop us from reaching the surface. The fleet accelerated. The moon grew larger in the viewports, its surface scarred with human installations. Railguns mounted on the lunar surface opened fire, adding their fury to the orbital platforms. More ships died. 1,000. 1,200. The fleet contracted, the survivors tightening formation as their numbers dwindled, and then they crossed into near-Earth space, and the gravel screen activated. General Chen had held the weapon in reserve, waiting for exactly this moment. The hegemony ships were packed tight, trying to concentrate their numbers for the final assault. They were moving fast, committed to their attack run, unable to change course quickly. They were exactly where she wanted them. All screen projectors, fire, she ordered. The railgun platforms did not aim at the ships. They aimed at empty space, at coordinates where millions of tungsten pellets waited in carefully calculated patterns. The railgun rounds screamed through the void and struck the pellet clouds, transferring their kinetic energy in cascading collisions. 200 million pellets accelerated to lethal velocities in a matter of seconds. The combined fleet flew into a wall of metal. On the Grand Sovereign, alarms screamed as thousands of impacts registered on the hull. The ship shuddered like a beast being stung by hornets. Each pellet was small, but there were so many and they were moving so fast. "Shields are failing," Saurus shouted. "Multiple hull breaches. We're losing structural integrity." Malachar gripped his command chair as the deck tilted beneath him. Around him, crew members were thrown from their stations. Displays flickered and died. The lights went red. He looked at the tactical display, trying to understand what was happening. Ships were dying everywhere. Not from single railgun strikes, but from thousands of smaller impacts. The shields, designed to stop concentrated energy weapons, could not handle the diffuse barrage of physical projectiles. The hulls, designed to withstand plasma, were being shredded by metal moving at relativistic speeds. In 20 minutes, 2,000 ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors scattered, breaking formation, fleeing in every direction. There was no organization, no strategy, just raw survival instinct as crews realized that continuing the attack meant certain death. "Admiral Saurus," Malachar said, his voice strangely calm, "order the retreat." "High Lord? Order the retreat. We have lost." The words tasted like poison, but they were true. He had brought the greatest fleet in galactic history to crush a primitive world, and the primitives had crushed him instead. "Signal all ships, disengage and withdraw to Rally Point Sigma. We are done here." The orders went out. The surviving ships, less than a third of the force that had arrived, began their limping retreat toward the edge of the system. Malachar remained on the bridge of the Grand Sovereign, watching the wreckage of his fleet drift past the viewports. So many dead, so many ships destroyed. The military power of the great houses shattered in a single afternoon. And somewhere on the blue world below, the primitives were watching, waiting, probably preparing to fire again if his survivors got too close. He should hate them. He should burn with rage at what they had done. But all he felt was a strange, hollow emptiness. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years because no one could challenge their power. That power was now broken. The shields were useless. The fleets were vulnerable. Everything his civilization had built was suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. "High Lord," a communication officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through." General Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes were steady. "High Lord Malachar, Your fleet is welcome to withdraw. We will not fire on retreating vessels. Please collect your survivors and your wounded. We have no desire for further bloodshed. Malachar stared at her. You could destroy us all. Why show mercy? Because we are not like you, Chen replied. We do not seek to rule. We do not seek revenge. We simply want to be free. Today we have proven that we can defend that freedom. What happens next is up to you. The screen went dark. Malachar sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars. What happened next? As if there were any choice now, the great houses were ruined. The subject species would revolt. The hegemony itself would crumble. Everything was about to change. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, High Lord Malachar sat in a room that was not a prison cell. The humans had been very specific about that. They called it a guest quarters. It had comfortable furniture, a window with a view of green hills, and access to any book or entertainment he requested. Guards stood outside the door, but they were polite and did not treat him like a criminal. It was, he reflected, a very strange way to treat a defeated enemy. The door opened and General Sarah Chen walked in. She looked older than she had in the communications, the stress of the past months written in the lines of her face. But her eyes were still sharp, still steady. High Lord Malachar, she said. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I am your prisoner. I did not realize I had a choice. You always have a choice. Chen took a seat across from him. That's something we've been trying to teach the galaxy. Everyone has a choice, even those who think they don't. Malachar studied her carefully. In the months since his capture, he had tried to understand these humans. They made no sense by the standards he knew. They had defeated the greatest military force in galactic history, and instead of pressing their advantage, they had stopped. Instead of demanding tribute, they had offered aid. Instead of executing their prisoners, they had housed them comfortably and treated their wounds. Why am I here? He asked finally. You could have killed me at any point. You could have used me as a hostage. You could have paraded me in chains before your people. Instead, you give me a comfortable room and polite guards. I do not understand your purpose. Chen was quiet for a moment. You want to understand our purpose? I'll tell you. We want peace. Peace. Malachar laughed bitterly. You have destroyed the hegemony. Every subject world is in revolt. The great houses are fighting each other for scraps of power. The galaxy is in chaos. This is your peace? No. This is the transition. Chen leaned forward. The hegemony wasn't peace, Malachar. It was order enforced at gunpoint. Millions of species kept in line through fear and violence. That's not peace. That's a cage. And cages always break eventually. So you broke the cage. And now what? The strong will devour the weak. Wars will spread across the galaxy. Billions will die. Maybe. Or maybe something better will emerge. Chen stood and walked to the window. Do you know the history of my species, High Lord? We spent most of our existence fighting each other. Wars over territory, resources, ideology, religion. We killed each other in numbers that would horrify any civilized species. And yet somehow, we survived. We grew. We learned. She turned back to face him. The lesson we learned was this. Lasting peace cannot be imposed from above. It has to be built from below. By people who choose it. By nations that see more benefit in cooperation than in conflict. It's messy and slow, and sometimes it fails. But when it works, it's real. Not a cage. A garden. Malachar shook his head. You are naive. The galaxy is not your peaceful garden. It is full of species who will take advantage of your weakness. Probably. But we're not as weak as you think. Chen smiled slightly. We have the railguns. We have the technology. If someone attacks us, we can defend ourselves. But we have no interest in conquest. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to live in it. Then what do you want from me? Chen returned to her chair and sat down. I want you to help us build something new. The proposal Chen laid out was unlike anything Malachar had ever encountered. Humanity was not interested in replacing the hegemony with a human empire. They were not interested in collecting tribute or installing puppet governments. Instead, they wanted to create something they called a galactic council, a body where every species, large or small, strong or weak, would have an equal voice. This is impossible, Malachar said. The Keth would never sit beside the Vorian. The Merlin would never accept any structure that gives power to their former masters. The hatreds are too deep. They're deep because the hegemony kept them deep, Chen replied. Divide and conquer. Keep the subject races fighting each other so they never unite against you. I know the strategy. We've used it ourselves in darker chapters of our history. And you think you can undo 12,000 years of resentment? No. I think the species themselves can undo it if we give them the chance. Chen pulled out a data pad and handed it to him. This is the Charter of Equal Stars. We've been working on it for months. Every signatory species gets one vote in the council, regardless of size or power. Disputes are resolved through arbitration. Military action against another signatory requires a two-thirds majority approval. Malachar read through the document. It was idealistic, naive, and yet there was something in it that stirred a feeling he had not experienced in centuries. Something that might have been hope. Why me? He asked. Why do you need my help? Because you were the most powerful leader in the galaxy, Chen said. The High Lord of the Council of 12. If you sign this charter, it tells every other species that the old order is truly over. That even the great houses accept the new reality. It won't solve everything. There will still be conflicts, still be violence. But it's a start. And what happens to me? To my people? The great houses have lost everything. Our fleets are destroyed. Our power is broken. We will be prey for every species we ever wronged. You'll keep your worlds, your wealth, your cultures, but your military monopoly is over. Chen met his gaze. I know that seems like a terrible loss, but think about what you're gaining. You don't have to fear assassination by rival houses. You don't have to maintain massive fleets to project power. You don't have to spend every moment wondering when the next rebellion will come. She leaned back. For 12,000 years, you've been masters of the galaxy. And what has it gotten you? Paranoia, violence, the constant struggle to maintain control. Is that really what you want for the next 12,000 years? Malachar was silent for a long time. He thought about his life. 3 centuries of service to the hegemony. Countless decisions made in the name of order and power. The wars he had authorized, the rebellions he had crushed, the lives he had ended, directly or indirectly. He had always believed it was necessary, that the galaxy needed a strong hand to guide it, that without the hegemony, everything would collapse into chaos. But here were the humans, offering another way. A way that seemed impossible, that violated everything he had ever believed. And yet, looking at General Chen, he saw no trace of the ruthlessness he would have expected from a conquering power. He saw only determination and, perhaps, a genuine desire for something better. You truly believe this can work, he said. I believe it's worth trying. Chen stood and extended her hand. High Lord Malachar of the Great Houses, will you help us build a galaxy where no one has to fear conquest? Where every species can grow and develop without worrying about the boot on their neck? Malachar looked at her hand. Such a strange human gesture. A symbol of trust between equals. Equals. He had never been equal to anyone. He had always been above or below, ruler or ruled. The concept was foreign to him, and yet somehow it did not feel wrong. He took her hand. The signing ceremony took place 3 months later, in a great hall built on a space station in neutral territory. Representatives from 50 species gathered to witness the moment. Former masters and former slaves stood side by side, united by the recognition that the old way had failed. The gallery was filled with journalists and historians, recording every moment for posterity. General Chen stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled crowd. Behind her, the Charter of Equal Stars was displayed on a massive screen, its words visible to all. Today, she began, we take the first step toward a new kind of galaxy. Not an empire, not a hegemony, a community, a partnership of equals, bound by mutual respect and common purpose. She looked at the faces before her. Aliens of every shape and size, species that had been at war for millennia, now gathered in peace. This will not be easy. We carry the scars of history. We carry resentments and fears that will not disappear overnight. There will be conflicts, There will be setbacks. There will be those who say this experiment is doomed to fail. Her voice grew stronger. But I believe that what unites us is stronger than what divides us. I believe that every species, given the chance, will choose cooperation over conquest. I believe that the galaxy is big enough for all of us to thrive. She stepped back from the podium and gestured to the table where the charter waited to be signed. Let us begin. One by one, the representatives came forward. They signed their names in their own languages, in their own scripts. The Keth signed beside the Vorian. The Merlan signed beside the former masters who had once crushed their rebellion. High Lord Malachar signed on behalf of the great houses, his hand steady despite the weight of what he was doing. And when it was done, when 50 names marked the charter, the hall erupted in applause. Later that evening, General Chen stood on an observation deck, watching the stars. The ceremony was over. The delegates had returned to their ships. The galaxy was still full of problems, still trembling on the edge of chaos. But something had changed. Something new had been born. Footsteps approached, and she turned to see Admiral Corveth San walking toward her. The former enemy commander had been among the first to embrace the new order, becoming an ambassador for peace between his species and humanity. "General," he said, "may I join you?" "Of course." She turned back to the stars. "It's strange, isn't it? A year ago, you were trying to conquer my world. Now we're signing peace treaties together. A year ago, I believed the hegemony was eternal. Now I believe nothing is eternal." Corveth moved to stand beside her. "You changed everything, you know. Not just with your weapons, with your choices." "What do you mean?" "After you defeated our fleet, you could have demanded anything. Revenge, tribute, the subjugation of our species. It was what we would have done. It was what every empire in galactic history has done. But you chose differently. You chose to help us." Chen was quiet for a moment. "We spent a long time learning that lesson. That true strength isn't about domination. It's about building something bigger than yourself, something that makes everyone better. Your species is young. How did you learn it so quickly?" She smiled. "We made a lot of mistakes first. Wars, genocides, cruelty beyond imagination. We learned what happens when power goes unchecked, and we decided we didn't want to be that kind of species anymore." Corveth considered this. "Perhaps that is why you succeeded where others failed. You remembered your own weakness." "Maybe." Chen turned away from the viewport. "But we're not done yet. This charter is just a beginning. Building a real peace will take generations. There will be setbacks. There will be failures. Species will test the boundaries, push for advantage, fall back into old patterns. And when they do, we'll remind them of today, of this moment when 50 species chose to try something different." She started walking toward the exit. "Would you like to get a drink, Admiral? I think we've earned it." Corveth fell into step beside her. "I would like that, General." They walked together through the station, former enemies, now unlikely friends. Behind them, through the observation deck windows, the stars burned on as they always had, indifferent to the small dramas of the species that lived among them. But for the first time in 12,000 years, those species were choosing their own destiny. The first human railgun had fired, and the galactic rulers had lost their crowns. But something better had risen in their place.